Hey, it's me, Miss G. A few of you have told me that these videos have been working, so I'm going to continue making them. Hopefully, they continue helping you learn. Okay, great. So today I want to talk about reliable sources. It's come to my attention that we still aren't sure what reliable sources are, and that's totally fine. We're new to this. Usually, your teachers are giving you the sources. Um, Usually, your teachers are finding the sources for you, or Regents, you're given the sources. And obviously, for research essays, for research writing, when it comes to this class or in college, that's not going to happen. And even for daily use, if something is wrong and you want to do some research on the issue, you should be using reliable sources always. So today I just want to talk about how to find reliable sources and how to make sure that our sources are indeed reliable. There are a few ways that we can make sure a source is reliable, which we have gone over in class, in person and on Google Classroom, but we're going to do it again. All right. So one way you can tell if a source is reliable is by the author. If the author is not present, that is okay. It doesn't automatically mean that it's not reliable, but that does mean that you have to go to extra lengths to make sure that it is indeed reliable. I'm going to use my makeshift whiteout. I hate that that's backwards. It's so annoying. I'm sorry. So, the author, right? If there's no author present, it's okay. But you still need to make sure that your source is indeed reliable. There are other ways to check, and we'll talk about that in a second. But with that being said, just because there is an author's name present doesn't mean it's automatically reliable. Okay? We can see this in blog posts, right? In blogs, usually the name of the author is present, but that does not mean that he or she or they are experts in their fields. The way to check if an expert is in their field is to simply Google them, right? So if I come across a website and the name is Sarah Gelfars, right? Let's say I found an article about teaching, okay? So I find this article and I find the author's name is Sarah Gelfars. So I can simply do a Google search, all right? If I'm a published author, most likely I will have some sort of page written about me, or the website itself will have an about the authors page. If the website itself has a page about the authors, that's great. Always check that out. Or underneath the article, it will have a little blurb about the author, right? So, ways to check if the author is an expert or indeed reliable. If they are a journalist or a professional researcher, right? That's their job to do research, they know how to research. That's one way. If the author is an expert in their field. So, if I'm writing if I'm writing an article about teaching, I have a degree in education. I am a teacher, right? I have experience in teaching. That makes me an expert in the field. That means that what I'm writing is reliable. If I'm writing an article about koala bears or animals in general, do I know anything about animals? No. The most I know about animals are like cats and rabbits, but that doesn't mean I'm an expert in any way. I don't have a degree in it. I am not a professional researcher when it comes to that. So I would not be a reliable source, and I am not a reliable author. So my article based on animals is not reliable. I can talk about my experiences with animals, but that doesn't mean you should be using my article about animals in your essay. That is not a reliable source. Another way to make sure that a source is reliable is the website ending. And I know we've talked about this a million times, but I want to go over it again. All right? So there are a few different endings when it comes to sources that you can make sure that it is reliable. Okay? These are the four main ones. .edu, that means it's from an educational institution, so like a college, maybe the Department of Education. That means that it is from an institutional educational site, so it is probably reliable. .net, .net you have to be more careful, but 90% of the time with .net it is probably going to be reliable. .org, that means it's an organization. That also means it's probably reliable. .gov, that means it is a government institution. The thing with, what makes these different than, let's say, .com is that people are monitoring these guys. People aren't really monitoring this guy. People are more monitoring these guys, okay? That means that someone is overlooking. That means someone is checking out the sources that they are including. That means someone is checking out the facts and figures. With that being said, just because it has an ending of .edu, .net, .org, or .gov, that does not mean that you should be like, oh, it's reliable. An example would be Wikipedia. Wikipedia ends in, I'm pretty sure, .org. But you should never be using Wikipedia. Why? Because any regular Sam can go in there and make changes to it. All right? So just like you don't want to take a source just because there's an author's name present, same with these endings, right? You always have to make sure that you are checking for multiple things. The other way that you can check if a source is reliable is by the actual website itself. So if the website has spelling errors, you probably don't want to use that. If the website isn't organized, you probably don't want to use that. If the website does not cite their sources, you definitely don't want to use that. Just because it's pretty and uses bright colors doesn't mean it's automatically reliable. Okay? If they're citing evidence and they're not giving you a works cited page, do not use it, right? Same with us. We still need to keep our evidence cited. We need to include that works cited page at the end of our essay, right? So that way, our readers know that our essays are reliable, our information is reliable. Same with websites. Anyone can make a website. I can go make a website if I wanted to. But we have to make sure that things we're looking at are actually reliable. So, we said organized, edited, and cited sources. Okay? Sometimes websites have a contact info page. That's also a cool thing. That way, if you're ever worried about the source being indeed reliable, you can contact that website and say, hey, who are your sources? Who are your writers? Right? Okay? So always check out the website. If it kind of looks weird, if it looks a little junky, I probably wouldn't use it. If you are noticing spelling errors throughout the articles, don't use it. If you are seeing that they have evidence and aren't citing their sources, don't use it. If they are asking you to buy things a lot of the time, you probably want to check it out a little more. Okay? So we have the author, the website ending, and the actual website itself. Another word that I like to use is aesthetic. The aesthetic is how something makes you feel, the way it looks, right? The way something portrays itself. Okay? So always look for that aesthetic. Sorry, trying to away something looks. Okay? So if the website looks a little disorganized, kind of ugly, weird, maybe don't use it. Okay? Um, but that being said, just because a website is pretty and uses lots of pictures, that still doesn't mean it's reliable, right? We still have to make sure that everything is up to code. Okay? Um, and the other way we can look at and make sure our sources are reliable is by looking at the type of source it is. Okay, so what I mean by that is, what kind of website is it? If it's a blog, you're not going to use it, right? We don't use blog posts. We don't use Twitter. We don't use Facebook. We don't use social media unless it's from a verified politician or a verified researcher, verified journalist. But for our class, we're not going to use social media, okay? Unless we are portraying something that someone said to prove a point, right? But for evidence, we don't use social media in this class. Or blogs. We don't use Wikipedia. We don't use buying and selling websites, right? None of that. Sources we can use are sources that we know are reliable, right? The New York Times, newspapers, newspaper websites. The reason we can use newspaper websites is because they have professional journalists, professional researchers. They know how to research, they know how to find information. So the New York Times is a good one, the Washington Post, the Daily News. But keep in mind, when you are looking at newspaper sources, they are most likely going to be biased or opinionated, okay? You can use biased articles, but you want to be careful with that as well. Okay, so if it's in a PDF form, which means like a document, be careful with those because sometimes we don't know where those originated from, right? Any Joe Schmo can write a PDF form and upload it on Google. So be careful with that as well. If it's from a database, that's good. Databases are what college students use in order to find information. We will talk about that for term 3. I'm not going to get into it right now, but if you do use information from a database or a college level source, that's fine. With that being said, sources from colleges, right? We know those are okay. Purdue OWL is a great one. If the source is from a government site, that's good too. The CDC, right? That's a government issued site. That's a good one to use. The Department of Education, if those have sources, that's a good one to use as well. So things like that. National Geographic, that's also a great one to use. All right, so things that we know are reliable. Animal Planet, I know Animal Planet, I've looked it up. That one we can use, okay? So you always want to make sure you have those 4 things in mind when you are looking for reliable sources. With that being said, just because it ends in a .org doesn't mean you can automatically use it. You need to do more research on that. Just because there's an author present doesn't mean it's automatically reliable. You have to check all boxes that you can, okay? Use multiple ways to make sure it's reliable. You should always have a minimum of 2 reasons why you are using a website. You never know if I'm going to be like, hey, is this reliable? Right? Keep in mind that I will be checking your sources, and if they aren't reliable, you will be getting points off. Using unreliable sources is very dangerous. Number 1, you can fail an entire project. Number 2, you can be giving wrong information. Number 3, you can fail a class, right? So we always want to use reliable sources. We always want to make sure that our information is correct, that we are getting the information from someone we can trust, okay? A reliable source means it is a trustworthy and truthful source. If a source is biased, like I said before, that is okay, but you do want to keep that in mind, right? Biased, unbiased, opinionated, edited, editorial, we want to keep those in mind. Okay, so those are a few ways to make sure a source is reliable. If you have any questions, please email me. And again, I have live sessions almost every day, pretty much every day from 11 to 12, unless I have a meeting. Okay, so please keep these in mind when you are looking for reliable sources. I know that some of you have already written your paragraphs. Please, please, please make sure that you are using reliable sources. Look back in your paragraphs. All right? All right. Miss G out.